Let's see if I can remember how this thing works. At the time of recording this video, it's been about 8 or 9 months since I last uploaded anything meaningful to my channel. Over the 5 or 6 years that I've had this channel, that's completely unheard of for me to be offline for that long. So I thought I would record this video to serve 2 purposes. One, to give you a slight insight into why I've been offline for so long during 2023, and 2, almost as a I'm back type of announcement, to let you know that both myself and yours truly here will be back more regularly uploading videos. So a number of things have happened that have collectively impinged upon me getting out in the hills or in the woods, and in turn making videos for this channel. So let's talk about the first one, because it's the trickiest one I suppose for me to talk about. Just over a year ago, beginning of December 2022, I was in London for work. I was sat in a hotel restaurant having my breakfast. I got a phone call from my wife at 7:30 in the morning, said, "Craig, you need to come home. Finley," who many of you know as my son, he's been knocked off his bike and he's currently pinned under a car, and with him now they're trying to get him out from the car. You can, well, hopefully you can, but you can perhaps start to imagine what is going through my mind at that point. I had no mode of transport. I'd gone down on train. My train ticket wasn't valid until the following day. Thankfully, my work pulled out all the stops. They threw me in a taxi at 8 o'clock in the morning, said just drive him where he needs to be. Where he needs to be is about 4 to 6 hours away from where I was for work purposes. Finn had been knocked off his bike about 150 metres from our house whilst doing his paper round by a taxi driver. He was trapped under the taxi for over an hour whilst the necessary resources were put in place to extract him due to ambulance strikes. My wife was with him for much of that time because the accident was so close to our house. Whilst I'm travelling up north, he gets extracted from under the car, taken in a land ambulance to our local hospital. They do lots of assessments on him and surveys and so on and so forth and tests. They decide that he needs to be taken by air ambulance to Alderhay Children's Hospital, which for those of you that don't know is a specialist children's hospital here in the UK, actually quite close to where I live in terms of flying time. So that was all good. I actually got, bizarrely, to the hospital, the children's hospital, before he did. Because of the amount of time it took to arrange the air ambulance and so on and so forth. So I was there when he arrived. He was conscious. He was in a bad way. He was seriously injured. He had his whites of his eyes were just blood red. His face was swollen. He had kind of like these swelling marks on his face that are fairly typical with crush injuries. The hospital told me he had a suspected breach of his airway. He had a pneumothorax in several places, which is air in his chest cavity that shouldn't be there, in several places in his chest. He broke his spine in 2 places. He fractured his pelvis. He had internal bleeding on his pelvis. He cracked several of his front teeth quite badly. He broke some ribs, and he had internal bleeding. He broke some ribs, and he his lower back looked like it had been through a meat grinder. It was just shredded in terms of how he'd been dragged and pinned and so on under the vehicle. Let me get to the good news really quickly before I upset myself. He's fine. This happened in the run-up to Christmas 2022. By Christmas, he was home. He was spent a few days in a high dependency ward, understandably, with those injuries. He was then kind of de-escalated. He was seen. He was sent home after about, I think it was a week to 10 days. The specifics escape me at the moment, but he was sent home. He's had a long road to recovery, as you can imagine, with those injuries. But the good news is, as of me recording this video today, he's at school. He's out going out with his mates. To look at him, to see him move around, it's nothing short of a miracle. And it takes a lot for me to say that. It's nothing short of a miracle. He's still got some pain in his lower back. I worry that he'll always have that pain in his lower back, to be honest. But, you know, compared to what the alternatives were, we are all incredibly lucky. For some time afterwards, I had a sense of guilt. And it was around the guilt around not being there not immediately being there for him, not being able to lay down next to the taxi and hold his hand whilst he was under it like my wife did, taking so long to be able to see him, even though in reality it was 4 to 6 hours. It felt like several lifetimes over. I had a sense of guilt of not being there and being away from him, and that kept me at home physically and mentally for quite some time afterwards. I didn't go to the London office for quite a period of time afterwards, and I've got to say they were great about it. They didn't pressure me to do that. I also didn't go far from home, which, as you can imagine, that stops me going out in the hills, because even though the hills aren't 4 to 6 hours away from where I live, I don't have a phone signal. I rarely have a phone signal when I'm in the hills. So there was that constant nagging doubt about, what if something happens? What if this happens? What if somebody else had an accident? What if this happens at home? What if I became sort of a prisoner in terms of that guilt of not being there for him when it happened. So that's one of the reasons. For a decent chunk of the first half or so of last year, I just wasn't going out, and you kind of get a sense as to why I wasn't going out. But once again, to stress, Finley's in a bloody good place at the moment. He's getting stronger, he's getting better. To look at him, you wouldn't notice that he'd had the injuries that he had had. So that took me up to about May, June of last year. Then something else happened. Regular channel viewers will know that I've suffered with knee problems for decades. In fact, in the short time that I've had this YouTube channel, I've had 2, 3, maybe 4 knee operations in that period of time. The last big knee operation I had involved them breaking my femur, putting some plates and pins in it to correct the angle of my knee, to try and resolve some arthritis that I've got in my left knee because I'm too young for a knee replacement. That occurred a few years ago, that operation, but it never really solved the problem. And I went to see a military surgeon and he said, I think your knee problem's sorted. I think it's the metal wear that we've put in your knee or in your femur that we'd normally leave in there. I suspect that's what's causing the pain and the problems. So I went on a waiting list. In May of last year, I came to the top of that waiting list. So that's now 6 months after Finley's accident, 5 or 6 months afterwards. I came to the top of that waiting list, so went back into hospital to have my leg opened up again, to have my femur faffed about with, to have all these bolts and plates and pins taken out and sewn back up again. I'm back on the road to rehab. As you can imagine, cutting through into your femur and faffing around with that is no small operation. So that took a lot of rehab, that took a lot of time. Not until I was mobile again. I was actually mobile quite quickly compared to the op prior to that, but I wasn't confident in going out in the hills. I wasn't confident that I wasn't going to be a liability to somebody else or a mountain rescue team. There was still some weakness in the leg, or I felt there was some weakness in the leg. Mentally, I wasn't comfortable in getting out and doing the sorts of things that I'd been doing previously. So again, prior to that, there was kind of a mental imprisonment that I had because of that wanting to stay at home a great deal. And then when that started to kind of clear up, I had this physical imprisonment in terms of I didn't want to sort of get out on the hills because of the weakness that there was in that knee. So that then takes me into the sort of late spring, summer, before that recuperation, before that recovery had occurred, and I was kind of physically and mentally strong to get back out in the hills again. And then something else happened. Then we hit the summer of 2023 and I had a health scare. I found a lump. I did what everyone advises you to do, which is to go to the doctor, who sent me to for a scan, who sent me to a specialist, so on and so on and so forth. Good news is there was nothing to worry about. It was a lump. It was nothing to be concerned about. Great. What wasn't great was the amount of time that it took to give me the good news that it wasn't bad news. I don't want to knock what the NHS are doing. I hear so many tales of people discovering lumps and being diagnosed and either treated or being told everything's fine in rapid fire time, and that's, you know, it's great to hear those stories. My story unfortunately isn't that. It took it was over a month, I want to say it was 6 or 7 weeks, something like that. It was a long time. It was a long time to find out that it was nothing to worry about. So that didn't stop me going out on the hills. That didn't stop me going out into the woods. But the pressure of that worry about, oh, could it be this? Could it be that? What if it is? What do I do? What do things look like in the future? How does that affect my family? Just an incredible pressure that, if I'm honest, it didn't make me want to go outdoors, if I'm honest. So there was that. And then, I'll get to the final point, and then on Friday the 13th of October 2023, so last year, I was made redundant from my job. And as at recording this video at the beginning of February 2024, 17 weeks later, but who's counting, I am still without a job and the money is running out. So some might say, and I can hear myself giving this advice to others, that would be a great time to get out on the hills. That would be a great time for your mental health, to get outdoors and do the things that you enjoy doing whenever you want without needing to worry about working hours. And that, you're not wrong. You wouldn't be wrong saying that. The reality is, I know that, but I haven't done that. I have thrown myself into updating my CV, my LinkedIn profile, networking, getting my name out there even more than it already is in the circles that I operate in, trying to do some extra qualifications. I'm incredibly qualified in what I do anyway, and more importantly, I'm incredibly experienced in what I do, but I thought if I can just add a little bit more, just sharpen the edge of that even more, it can't help with job prospects. But as I say, as at the time of recording this video, I am still without a full-time job, which again is a worry. Listen, this video has descended into a pity party, and I do not want it to be that, okay? There were some bloody awful times in 2023. There were also some good times. Family holiday for the first time in years, which was fantastic. Seeing my kids do really well at school. Finley has just done his sort of first year of his GCSEs and has got some outstanding, incredible results. Evie has just started to sort of go into that phase and he's doing really well at school and getting good reports. So, you know, I'm bleating on a bit and getting the old violin out. The reality is, it's not, it has been as bad as I've made it sound. There've been good times, there've been bad times. Unfortunately, the bad times have been more frequent and longer than the good times, but I am hoping that 2024 puts paid to that, and certainly hope that with this video is the start of me being able to and wanting to get out into the hills and into the woods more often. That's the video, folks. I'm not gonna go through the usual sort of closing down speech or anything like that. But that's me. Cards on the table now, heart on my sleeve, all of that. That's what 2023 looks like. That's why over the past 8 or 9 months ish, you haven't seen a great deal of activity on my channel. Fingers crossed that changes for the future though. Cheers.